They say forgiveness is a virtue, but I dare to ask, what if the real prison is not the hurt we hold against others, but the resentment we nurture against ourselves? Think about it. How many nights have you spent reliving old mistakes as if you could rewrite them? How many times has your own judgment been harsher than any word spoken by others? We live in an age where external validation dictates the value of the soul. A like on social media can seem more important than inner clarity. But isn't this world of comparisons and digital anxiety pulling us further away from what truly matters? Socrates would say, "Know thyself," and that is precisely where the wound lies, and perhaps the cure as well. Self-forgiveness is not indulgence, it is self-knowledge. It is a dive into one's own consciousness, where every mistake reveals itself as a silent teacher. But such a dive demands courage. It requires letting go of the mask we show to the world. It demands compassion for our own suffering. Imagine each resentment you hold as a stone in the backpack you carry every day. Now tell me, how long will you keep walking hunched over, dragging emotional scars that no longer reflect your truth? Some believe forgiving the world is a noble gesture, but what you may discover is that it could be the only path to true liberation, to a deep unity with life. What you are about to hear might change everything. Imagine a river. It is never the same because the water that flows today will never return tomorrow, and yet we insist on swimming against the current, trying to recover moments already gone. Mistakes become ghosts haunting our nights, as if the past could be redrawn by the force of resentment. But isn't that precisely where the first prison of the soul is born? In modern daily life, we see this clearly. How often does someone get stuck on a misinterpreted message or a social media post that didn't receive the external validation they expected? It seems small, yet it becomes a cycle of pain, feeding insecurity, anxiety, and social comparison. What should have been just a passing detail takes on the weight of a sentence. Socrates would ask, what is worse, to commit the mistake or to never examine it? Ignorance, he said, is the root of much suffering. By not understanding our own limits, we confuse learning with condemnation. But if every mistake is an opportunity for self-knowledge, why do we treat ourselves as enemies? The problem is that this ignorance makes us accumulate emotional scars, and the more we try to hide them, the more they shape the way we show up in the world. It is silence that suffocates, the invisible weight that distances us from authenticity. We become prisoners of an inner judgment that does not free us, but chains us. The Socratic solution arises as an invitation to question yourself. Not why did I fail, but what did I learn? Focusing on yourself is not selfishness, it is inner alignment. It is the moment to exchange resentment for compassion, self-criticism for empathy with yourself. Only then does clarity appear, opening space for letting go of the past. And you? Have you ever found yourself a prisoner of your own mistakes, carrying stones that exist only in memory? Answer in the comments. What do you find harder, forgiving others or practicing self-forgiveness? Think of a cracked mirror. It still reflects, but the image is distorted. This is what judgment looks like when awareness is missing. It gives us fragments of ourselves and others, but never the whole truth. When we look at the world through this broken glass, we see only flaws, and what could have been learning turns into resentment. In daily life, this happens when we misinterpret someone's behavior. A co-worker who doesn't reply to a message, a friend who seems distant, a cold comment on social media. The rushed mind takes over, and before we even seek clarity, we've already decided they despise me. That automatic judgment becomes suffering. And where does it come from? From modern haste, from the lack of presence, from the inability to practice inner silence. Plato reminded us that opinion is halfway between ignorance and knowledge. To judge without reflecting is to live by opinion, not wisdom. This ignorance carries serious consequences: human disconnection, loss of empathy, and the perpetuation of the cycle of pain. When we believe in the distorted image, we lose the chance to see the soul behind the mask. Self-criticism follows the same pattern. How many of us look at our mistakes as if they were eternal stains? Harsh judgment destroys confidence, drains energy, and blocks the balance needed for transformation. Instead of self-knowledge, we choose punishment and distance ourselves from inner freedom. The philosophical solution is simple but profound. Cultivate presence. Observe your thoughts before acting. Practice letting go of immediate conclusions. When we make space for empathy, judgment dissolves, compassion arises, and with it a broader vision of truth. The cracked mirror doesn't vanish, but we learn not to confuse the crack with the real image. And you? Have you noticed how many times you've judged someone, or yourself, without knowing the full story? What do you think is harder, suspending judgment or accepting the truth it hides? Now imagine a rusty chain. Each link is tied to the next, and even if one weakens, it still holds the whole structure together. So it is with the cycle of pain. An unhealed resentment becomes harsh words, which turn into emotional scars in someone else. And that person, without realizing it, repeats the same pattern forward. Pain is passed down from generation to generation, like an unwanted inheritance. In daily life, we see this in families, at work, and even on social media. Someone is attacked in a comment, feels hurt, and responds with more aggression. What began as a spark of frustration becomes a wildfire. Modern psychology has already studied this phenomenon. Unresolved traumas tend to manifest as reactive behaviors. In other words, without compassion, we transform suffering into repeated violence. Seneca warned, anger, if not restrained, is often more harmful than the offense that provoked it. And isn't that exactly what we see today? The lack of awareness creates an endless chain of resentment. One person's mistake multiplies in another's heart, and the result is the loss of collective peace. The consequence of this cycle is inner imprisonment. We become dependent on external validation, believing that an aggressive response is a sign of strength. But in truth, it is weakness in disguise. It is like carrying an invisible weight that corrodes your energy and prevents inner freedom. Philosophy offers a path, breaking the chain. Self-forgiveness is the key that shatters the rusty link. When someone chooses not to react, but to respond with clarity and empathy, the chain breaks. This choice requires focus on oneself, inner silence, and trust in the power of the soul. It is an act of transformation that liberates not only the one who forgives, but the entire chain around them. And you, have you ever realized that some of the pain you carry may not even be yours, but echoes of an ancient cycle? What do you think you could do to be the link that breaks this invisible chain? Now imagine a crowded theater. The lights go out, and everyone awaits the entrance of the protagonist. But when the curtain rises, the main character never appears. The stage is filled only with external voices, each one telling you who you should be. This is how we live when we forget to focus on ourselves. We hand over the leading role of our lives to the audience. In the modern world, this happens when we spend hours scrolling through feeds, comparing achievements, waiting for external validation to feel worthy. With every like, we feel a brief relief. With every digital silence, insecurity grows. We lose clarity because we no longer listen to ourselves. The inner silence, which could be a source of wisdom, is drowned out by the constant noise of comparison. Aristotle said that virtue lies in the middle ground. But how can we find balance if we are always turned outward, forgetting our authenticity? The consequence is clear: anxiety, depersonalization, a sense of emptiness. It is like drinking salt water. It seems to quench your thirst, but only deepens the dryness of the soul. This forgetting breeds resentment. We feel anger toward ourselves for not living up to social ideals, and anger toward others for reminding us of what we believe we are not. It becomes a vicious cycle of suffering. We lose unity with our own essence, and inner freedom feels distant. Philosophy calls us back to what is essential: self-knowledge. Socrates said, The unexamined life is not worth living. Turning inward is not selfishness, but courage. It is in this silence that clarity arises, where we discover inner power and learn detachment from the illusions that enslave us. It is in this inner alignment that self-forgiveness naturally flourishes. And you? Have you noticed that many times you live as a supporting actor on the stage of your own life? What do you think you need to let go of to reclaim authenticity? Now imagine standing before a perfect mirror with no cracks, no distortions. You look at yourself and you can no longer run away. No masks, no excuses, only you and the truth. This is the moment when philosophy becomes unbearable for some and liberating for others. It is the climax, when the soul finds itself naked before its own conscience. How many times have you realized that you lived more to be accepted than to be true? How many times have the mistakes you try to hide actually been doors to learning? And what if the suffering you avoid so much were precisely the key to your transformation? Socrates spared no one. The unexamined life is not worth living. That phrase echoes like thunder. It isn't advice, it's an ultimatum. To live without questioning, without looking within, without breaking the cycle of pain, that is surviving, not living. And I ask you, what if everything you believe about yourself is just an illusion? What if the judgment you carry is nothing more than a broken reflection? And what if self-forgiveness is not just a choice, but the only possible path to liberation? Plato would say that we are in the cave, staring at shadows. Epictetus would remind us that we do not control events, but our reactions to them. And here lies the shock. The world does not need to change for you to be free. You need to change the way you see yourself and others. Repetition, strength, impact. You are not your mistakes. You are not your resentment. You are not the judgment others made of you. You are consciousness. You are presence. You are inner power in its raw state, waiting only to be awakened. And now, before this mirror of the soul, the question that echoes is inevitable. Will you have the courage to forgive yourself and forgive the world? Now imagine an orchestra. Each instrument plays its melody, sometimes out of tune, sometimes dissonant. But when all find the same rhythm, what once seemed like chaos becomes harmony. So it is with life when we learn to practice forgiveness. What once seemed like noise reveals itself as part of a greater symphony, where even mistakes have their place in learning. In everyday life, we see the opposite. Social media full of judgments, news that fuels division, families in conflict over old resentments. The lack of compassion builds invisible walls that separate us. The consequence? Collective suffering, shared anxiety, a society marked by resentment. But aren't we all connected by the same soul that longs for peace? Epictetus reminded us, it's not things that disturb us, but the opinions we have about them. Judgment creates boundaries, but empathy dissolves distance. When we see in others the same emotional scars we carry, we realize that unity already exists. We just lack the clarity to recognize it. This movement is not indulgence. It is not about accepting abuse or justifying cruelty. It's about recognizing that anger only perpetuates the cycle of pain, while compassion restores our inner freedom. To forgive does not mean to forget, but to release the invisible chains that keep us bound to the past. And here lies the beauty. When we choose self-forgiveness, we naturally forgive the world, because the boundary between I and other begins to fade. We are all learners stumbling along the same path, all searching for the same transformation. In this inner alignment, we find not only peace, but also balance and resonance. And you, have you ever experienced that moment when you realized that someone else's pain was also your own? What do you find more challenging? Offering empathy to the one who hurt you, or practicing self-acceptance toward your own story? Picture a flame burning in your hand. At first, it seems to give warmth and even power, but the longer you hold the fire, the more it burns your own skin. That is resentment. We believe it protects us, but in truth, it consumes only the one who feeds it. Liberation begins the instant we let go of the flame. In daily life, we see people trapped in old stories, family arguments that never end, friendships broken by pride, relationships that become emotional prisons. We hold on to grudges as if they were proof of justice, but science has already warned us. Prolonged resentment raises stress, disrupts sleep, and even weakens the immune system. It is the body telling us that holding on to hatred is a burden for both soul and health. Seneca once said, "Revenge keeps the wounds alive." And isn't that what we experience? While we try to punish those who hurt us, we remain tied to them by an invisible chain. The consequence is clear. Instead of inner freedom, we cultivate a prison disguised as strength. Philosophy proposes a radical path: detachment. It is not about erasing the past, but about giving it new meaning. It is to look at the wound with compassion, to see in it not condemnation, but a teacher. It is to understand that true justice is not born from others' judgment, but from inner clarity. At that moment, self-forgiveness becomes an act of trust in one's own soul. It is believing that we no longer need the flame in order to exist, that life's energy flows better without the weight of chains. It is pure presence, authenticity rediscovered. And you? Have you realized that maybe you're holding on to the fire of resentment, believing its protection? Are you ready to let go of that flame and experience the peace that comes with detachment? Now think of a traveler lost in the desert. He carries old maps, but none of them show the reality of the land beneath his feet. By relying on those outdated papers, he only gets more lost. This is how we live when we insist on leading life based only on past mistakes or fears of the future. We forget the present, the only place where transformation happens. In daily life, this shows up as a restless mind, worrying about what we could have done differently, anxiety about what has yet to happen. On social media, this escape is obvious. Hours spent comparing idealized lives, chasing external validation, while our own life slips away unnoticed before our eyes. It is this absence of presence that distances us from clarity and authenticity. Socrates would provoke, "It is not living long, but living well that matters, and living well requires focus on the now." When we cultivate presence, we free ourselves from the cycle of pain that the past insists on repeating and from the illusion of control over the future. Suffering loses its grip because we understand that life exists only in the instant we breathe. The absence of presence generates painful consequences: superficial relationships, scattered energy, a constant sense of emptiness. It is like drinking water without ever quenching your thirst. We lose inner power, we trade balance for distraction, and the soul becomes hostage to external noise. Philosophy offers a simple yet transformative path: aligning with the present. This does not mean ignoring mistakes or denying emotional scars, but understanding them as part of an ongoing process of learning. When we accept life as flow, compassion expands and unity naturally reveals itself. And here arises the final reflection of this point. The present is not just a moment, but a portal. It is in the present that self-forgiveness is realized, that peace settles, that wisdom blossoms. Only in this silent and truthful place can we touch the essence of the soul. And you, have you noticed how your mind runs to the past or the future, stealing away your present? What could you do today, right now, to live with more focus, balance, and authenticity? Now imagine a crystal clear lake. When the wind blows hard, its surface is agitated and nothing can be seen at the bottom. But when the wind calms, the reflection of the mountain appears with clarity, revealing the beauty that was always there. So it is with inner peace. It does not mean the absence of movement, but a state in which consciousness aligns and truth is revealed. In modern life, the absence of this peace is almost the norm. We rush from one commitment to another, binge-watch shows to avoid silence, distract ourselves with endless scrolling on our phones. It seems we are afraid to stop, afraid to look inside, afraid to face self-knowledge. But without this pause, we become hostages to noise, and our soul hides behind the clamor. Aristotle reminded us, happiness depends upon ourselves. Peace, too. It does not lie in circumstances, but in the way we interpret what happens to us. Judgment, resentment, the endless chase for external validation are the winds that cloud our inner lake. The consequence is clear. A life without balance, without clarity, where emotional scars seem eternal. Philosophy points to silence as the cure. Socrates, through his maieutic method, brought truth to life in dialogue, but always starting from emptiness, from the question. It is in this space of silence, of detachment from ready-made answers, that forgiveness blossoms. It is when we release the weight of mistakes and embrace compassion that we experience true inner freedom. Peace, then, is not a destination, but a practice. It is the daily exercise of authenticity, of presence, of trust in inner power. When we choose peace, we choose life in its fullest form, without masks. Unity reveals itself. There is no I separate from the other, only a shared symphony of learning and transformation. And you? Have you ever lived a moment of silence so profound that you felt your entire life reorganize itself within you? How do you imagine your life would be if peace stopped being a distant wish and became a daily practice? Think of a loose leaf carried by the wind. It does not fight against the current of air, does not try to control where it goes. It simply surrenders. And in that surrender, it finds new places, lands on new soil, participates in new cycles. Such is life when we learn the power of letting go. It is not giving up, but trusting that each moment carries its own wisdom. In daily life, this seems almost impossible. We were taught to control everything, results at work, impressions on social media, even our own inner feelings. But excessive control generates anxiety and frustration because reality never bends to our expectations. Psychology has already shown those who practice acceptance and surrender handle stress better and reach higher levels of well-being. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but the way we look at them. When we resist what we cannot change, we feed suffering. But when we accept with clarity, even pain becomes a teacher." In that space, self-forgiveness flourishes and resentment loses its grip. Surrender is, in truth, an act of inner power. The consequence of living without surrender is exhaustion. We try to validate our existence through external achievements, but the emptiness persists. The soul cries out for authenticity, for inner alignment, for a space where trust replaces fear. And we only reach that when we surrender to what is, without useless resistance. Philosophy teaches true transformation does not come from control, but from openness. When we surrender, we do not deny our emotional scars. We give them new meaning. They cease to be memories of pain and become signs of learning, testimonies of a journey toward inner freedom. And here, at the final point of this path, the question that echoes is simple but decisive. Are you willing to surrender, to abandon the weight of judgment, and to discover in compassion the key to your own transformation? In the end, we realize that forgiveness and self-forgiveness are not isolated acts, but movements of consciousness. They are invitations to release the weight of mistakes, to transform resentment into learning, to trade judgment for compassion. What once seemed weakness reveals itself as strength, liberation. What once seemed distance between I and other reveals itself as unity. Socrates would remind us that life is only worth living when examined. And here, in this examination, we discover that each emotional scar is not a burden, but a mark of transformation. By accepting our imperfection, we align ourselves with authenticity and rediscover peace. Now the choice is yours. Remain trapped in the cycle of pain or surrender to the inner freedom that is born of self-forgiveness. This decision may seem small, but it is the seed of an entire life of clarity, balance, and confidence. If this reflection resonated with you, share in the comments. I choose peace. And if you want to continue this philosophical journey with me, subscribe and share this video so that more people may discover that true transformation begins within. Life does not wait, and the next step may reveal something even deeper